So before we get started, I just wanted to acknowledge Episcopal Communities and Services, ECS, we've been serving seniors since 1923. And we have communities, affordable housing communities. We have a moderate income rental property, and life plan communities. The three communities that are hosting this session today are as follows. The first, which opened its doors over 30 years ago, is the Canterbury, and the Canterbury is located in Ranchos Palos Verdes. The second, just over 16 years old, is the Covington. The Covington is located in Aliso Viejo, and getting ready to celebrate 5 years on December 17th is MonteCedro. So just 5 years old, that's very exciting. And MonteCedro is located in the foothills of Altadena. We are excited today to have our own residents, as you see on the screen, presenting today for you. And although COVID-19 is a big part of everybody's life today, we're not going to focus specifically on that during this session. We are, however, planning another session that will bring to you residents who have moved in since COVID-19 and to talk about the safety measures and our testing protocols and anything else that you'd want to know around COVID. So we will be having that session, and that date is to be determined, but coming soon. So for those of you who are just joining, we welcome you to our resident panel, Experiencing Community today. And with that, I am going to hand over the microphone to our resident moderator, Wendy Shiba, and Wendy will introduce herself and the rest of the panel. Wendy?
Thanks very much, Krista. And good afternoon to all of our guests. My name is Wendy Shiba. I'm a resident at MonteCedro, and I'll be serving as the moderator for today's panel discussion. It's my great pleasure to introduce the four panelists, and I will include both personal information, and I always like to toss in what I call a fun fact about each person. So in lieu of standard bios, my aim is to give you a good feel for the kinds of people who live at our ECS communities. So I'm going to go in alphabetical order, and that means I'll begin with Karen Morrow. And Karen, you want to give a wave to everybody? Karen has lived at the Covington since April of 2017. She was born in Los Angeles, but she was raised on the East Coast, primarily in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, and Washington, D.C. Before moving to the Covington, Karen lived for 58 years in Laguna Beach, California. She was widowed just 1 year after she and her husband of 57 years had moved to the Covington. Now, Karen has 6 children, 8 grandchildren, and 6 great-grandchildren, so it's quite a family. She has worked as a registered nurse, a marriage and family therapist, a religious educator, and a college instructor in psychology and theology. She's also been an active community volunteer and a leader in many organizations, and she's a worldwide traveler, has been all over the globe, literally. Now, at the Covington, Karen is president of the Residents Association, and previously she served as the recording secretary. Now, the fun fact that I like to include for Karen, in 2000, she and her husband, Tom, trekked in the Annapurna Range of the Himalayas of Nepal. And then in 2013, they walked enough of the Santiago del Compostela pilgrimage in Spain to be considered genuine pilgrims. And Karen, according to my research, this means that you walked a minimum of 100 kilometers or 62 miles of the entire Camino del Santiago. That's quite a feat. Next is Paula Rubin. And Paula has lived at Canterbury since January of 2013. Paula is a second-generation resident. Her mother was a resident there from 1988 to 1998, so they didn't overlap, but she is the second generation. Now, as you're soon going to hear from her delightful accent, Paula was born in Providence, Rhode Island. Paula, I think you told us that you park your car, if I could do that correctly. So before moving to the Canterbury, Paula lived in Torrance, California. She's lived many other places, but mainly in Rancho Palos Verdes. Paula is widowed. She has 4 children, 3 grandchildren, and 2 great-grandchildren. Her career was as a freelance editor and a ghostwriter. And in this capacity, she helped to get 12 books published, including 2 that made the New York Times bestseller list and 1 that was on Psychology Today's book club as its choice for the club. Paula was very active at the Cabrillo Beach Yacht Club and also Congregation Ner Tamid. She was busy with school activities when her children were young. Currently at the Canterbury, Paula is the secretary of the resident council, and she's very active serving on the dining, activity, and welcoming committees. Now, her fun fact is that before her husband died in 2006, they lived on a boat. It was, now lest you think it was a little cramped living space, it was a 48-foot boat in San Pedro. It had 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a full kitchen, and even a washer and dryer. Paula thinks it might actually have been larger than her present apartment is. Next in the lineup is Catherine Scheifele. Catherine has lived at MonteCedro since May of 2016. She was born in New York City and she was raised in Bronxville, a suburb of New York City. After college, she worked in New York and then she moved to San Francisco, where she spent 4 decades. She had a brief year's sojourn in London, and that was followed by desert living in Rancho Bernardo, Palm Desert, Westlake Village, and Palm Desert is where she and her husband Harry moved before moving to MonteCedro. Catherine had been widowed twice before she married Harry. Her story is similar to Karen's in that after they moved to MonteCedro, Harry passed away roughly a year. It was, I think, 1 year and 1 month after they moved in. Catherine has 2 daughters, 3 stepchildren, 9 step-grandchildren, and a brand new step-grandchild. Earlier in her life, Catherine was a reporter for a trade newspaper and also a staff member for the United Way. After motherhood, she, like Paula, became an avid volunteer with her daughter's school activities and also some women's clubs. At MonteCedro, she's a member of our theater group and our ever-growing group called 90 Plus. Her fun fact involves dynamite. Yes, it does. That's a true story. During the uranium hunting craze of the 1950s, Catherine and her first husband would occasionally rent a Geiger counter, which you could do back then, and you could actually go into a country store in the foothills and purchase dynamite without a license, without any instruction, but they had a little pamphlet and it was called The ABCs of Dynamiting. And Catherine and her husband proceeded to just blast away in the Panamint Mountains in Death Valley National Park. We're very happy that she lived to tell the tale to us today. And last but not least, our male member of the panel is Thad Zadowich. Thad has lived in MonteCedro since October 2019, so just past his first year anniversary. He was born in Reading, Pennsylvania. He's married to Margan Zadowich, and they are both retired Navy physicians who specialized in infectious diseases and epidemiology. Together, they have 5 children and 3 grandchildren. It's interesting about these shrinking families. One of our residents, Dick Espenshade, who has 5 children, thought that that entitled him to 25 grandchildren if they would all follow suit. Didn't get them. I think he has 13, but Thad, you and Margan have 5 kids and only 3 grands. Thad's career in the Navy took him to many places: Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, also Hampton Roads, Virginia, Rockville, Maryland, Chicago, Illinois, and Bethesda, Maryland. That was before he and Margan retired and moved to Pasadena in 2016. It was our good fortune that after visiting MonteCedro several times as guest lecturers representing the League of Women Voters, Thad and Margan decided that they would like to live here. So in the little over a year that he's lived at MonteCedro, Thad has quickly become involved in the community and has assumed already several leadership positions. He's vice president of the resident council, a member of our wellness committee, and previously served as an advisor for the Creative Living Academy. His fun fact is that Thad actually shook hands with 2, not just 1, but 2 World War II PT boat legends. Now, when I say PT boat legend, you may guess that one is John F. Kennedy, but also Vice Admiral John Bulkeley. And we all know the story of JFK and PT 109, especially if we've seen the film with Cliff Robertson. I confess that I didn't know about Vice Admiral Bulkeley. So I did a little research and I learned that he was one of the Navy's most highly decorated officers. He was the PT boat skipper who evacuated General Douglas MacArthur from Corregidor in the Philippines. And he actually has had a naval destroyer named for him. So that's a big wow. And Thad had the honor of meeting him in person. Finally, I will give you a little bit of information about me. I was born and grew up in Cleveland, Ohio. And during my single adult life, I lived on both coasts. I was bi-coastal and spent time in Philadelphia, San Francisco, Los Angeles, and New York City. And then I married my husband, Larry Pittman, 26 years ago. And together we have lived in Greenville, South Carolina, Cleveland, Ohio, and Encino, which is about 25 miles west of here. And we moved to MonteCedro a month after it opened in January 2016. My mom and I were the first two-generation family to live simultaneously at MonteCedro. So when she was 98 years old, Mom moved from an assisted living community in Cleveland, Ohio, to our courtyards here at MonteCedro, which is our memory care section. I had already been volunteering in the courtyards, and so I was able to see her virtually every day until she died just 6 months shy of her 100th birthday. My husband, Larry, has 2 married sons, and they've given us 5 amazing grandchildren. The grandkids range in age from 18 to 30. We don't have any great grandkids yet. I spent my career as a lawyer in a variety of positions. Most recently, I was general counsel of a large public company. And now that I'm retired, at least from my paycheck, I'm an active volunteer in a number of professional and nonprofit organizations. Here at MonteCedro, I'm the chair emeritus of the advisory group for our Creative Living Academy. And I also serve on our resident council and our dining committee. So my personal fun fact involves golf. I was a latecomer to golf. Larry taught me when I was already in my late 40s, but it turned out to be a real asset in business. And I made a hole-in-one during a corporate tournament when I was the only woman playing in the entire tournament. So not only did my personal team win, but more importantly, I was able to bond with my team captain, who had initially been very skeptical of women, both in the corporate executive suite as well as on the golf course. So we started the tournament with his thinking he was stuck with the only woman in the field. And afterward, he was very happy that I was on the team. So our 4 panelists were selected by marketing to give you a representative sampling of our 3 ECS independent living communities. And while each community has its own distinctive characteristics, I think that you'll see that we also have very much in common. One thing I will note is that, as Krista said, our lifestyle has been obviously constrained during the pandemic. But our goal today is to provide you information about life in our communities as we knew it before implementation of the current pandemic measures. So now we're going to get on with our panel discussion. The first thing that we wanted to do was to give you sort of a warm up to the lifestyle that we enjoy here at our 3 communities. And these are going to be introductory comments by each panelist. I call it setting the table for some of the more detailed discussion that we'll be getting into as we progress. So I'm going to turn to our 4 panelists, and I'm going to ask that each of you please share with us in a few sentences just a capsule summary of how you would describe the lifestyle at your community to your family and friends and anybody who asks what's it like living there, and also a few snippets about what it is that you like best about living in your community. Catherine, we're going to begin with you, and I'll remind people Catherine is a resident at MonteCedro. So Catherine, please.
Thank you, Wendy. You know, when you live in your own home or condominium and you age, and often when you can't drive, you find your activities and your participation in them shrinking. And that is the wonderful thing about MonteCedro. We have a plethora of activities, and there's something for everybody. whether you're an athlete or a scholar or just a dilettante. We have lecturers from the universities which surround Los Angeles. We have music from classical to jazz. We have field trips before the pandemic. We have bridge. I love bridge. And we have other games like mahjong and poker and skip go. We have a wonderful, wonderful library, which is staffed and run exclusively by residents. And they've even started now putting in some bestsellers. We have special interest groups. I particularly like to do the theater. People like to do, who have a dog, like the kennel group. We have gardeners, and we have people who say quilt, who are wonderful quilters. So we really have a lot of special interest groups. You can find just what you like to do. So I find that living here it's comfortable. It's surrounded by residents who are really interesting, a diverse group, very friendly, and I have just wonderful, wonderful activities. That's my favorite thing.
Oh, thank you so much, Catherine, for painting that vivid picture for us. And Paula, now please tell us about your lifestyle at the Canterbury and what it is that you like the best.
Well, the first thing I like is how friendly it is. And it's a warm, nice place. But there's something else that I think is really important, and that's how safe I feel. We all wear these little buttons, some around our neck, that we push no matter where we are, if we fall, if we need help, and help will come immediately. But there's another kind of safety I want to talk about, and that is the fact that all three of our units are nonprofit. And, you know, when I came here and they talked about nonprofit and how the money goes back into the community, I said, okay, very nice. And they said I wouldn't be thrown out if I ran out of money. I said, yes, very nice, but where do I live? And tell me what color the floor is going to be. But it really came back to me how important this is. A friend of mine who lives in another place 2 years ago ran out of money. Her financial advisor really messed things up for her. She's 85 years old. She had health condition, and she was literally out on the street looking for a place to know. Now, I know that will never happen to me because I live at the Canterbury, and safety is important. It makes me feel good, and it really makes my family feel good about that too.
Thank you so much, Paul, and thank you for sharing why I think all of us were influenced to want to live in a nonprofit community. We're going to go next to Thad Zadowich, who, as I said, resides at MonteCedro. Thad, how do you describe your lifestyle here to people who ask, and what is it that you like the best?
Well, I will go back to something you mentioned about my wife and I. We came here the very first time we saw MonteCedro. We had been invited to give a presentation from the League of Women Voters. It was during election season in 2017. And we were impressed. We had no idea how many people would be there. The auditorium was filled. Very nice facilities. I noticed that immediately, but even more so, you could detect quickly that this was a vibrant and very, very intellectually curious community. And my wife and I are both drawn to that. We like to have our minds kind of tickled, if you will. We also realized that, you know, the people here were really, really friendly, and they asked questions. They invited us to lunch that day, which was fascinating because we got a free lunch. I hadn't anticipated that. You know, basically we found ourselves drawn more and more to the idea that there was a community of like-minded people with whom we shared many interests, many pursuits, a lot of it intellectual, but as was pointed out, we do other things. We go on field trips. We've been down to various museums and down to the LA Phil. That's the kind of thing to me that is really compelling about MonteCedro. It is a total community, and it is, I'm thrilled with our choice of moving here.
Thank you so much, Thad. And to round out the description of our lifestyle, our communities, Karen, who resides at the Covington, is going to share her thoughts with us. Thank you, Karen.
Well, I'm one who's always loved to live life to the fullest. And when I arrived here, as I said before, I came with my husband, and he was needing a lot of special care. And yet, through that period of time, I saw immediately what a friendly, loving, exciting place to live this was. Even my husband, who couldn't cope with all sorts of things, was nurtured and educated and received all sorts of care. And I was able to go out into the community, and as Thad and Catherine and Paula have said, everything that they've said, I could echo. But the friendships and the ability to just feel at home. It's a real home. I feel so welcome here, so much a home. And my children feel very, very happy that I'm here. It's a wonderful situation to be in.
Thank you so much. I want to thank all four of our panelists for their introductory remarks. And I think that the audience can already discern a pattern. Even though we live in 3 different communities, there's a consistent theme of being drawn to the feeling of community with fellow residents, and also the exceptional quality of what we call life enrichment in our programming here in the ECS communities. So let's begin by talking about certain aspects of life enrichment. And I'm going to lead off in talking about our Creative Living Academy. This is an aspect of our lifestyle that's near and dear to me because I served as the first chair of the Creative Living Academy advisors and turned over the baton this year, but they've given me the title of Chair Emeritus, so I'm still involved with the Academy. It is really one of the most distinctive features about living in the ECS communities. We have a group of resident advisors, and it is very much a resident-driven program, staff-supported. We have an exceptional life enrichment staff. I wanted to share with the audience the vision statement for our Creative Living Academy. We worked very hard in honing this statement when we first formed the Academy. We had a half-a-day brainstorming session with our advisors to do some strategic planning. And for those of you who have been involved in visioning, you recognize that a lot of ideas go up, and then you sort of filter and you refine. And at the end of the day, when you have a vision statement of just a couple of sentences, every word, every phrase has been very carefully chosen to depict exactly what it is that we hold most dear about the program. So I'm going to read for you the vision statement of the Creative Living Academy. The Creative Living Academy delivers diverse and stimulating opportunities for lifelong learning, growth, and fulfillment in an accessible atmosphere that is welcoming, inclusive, and respectful to all. To provide educational, cultural, and recreational offerings, we harness the wealth of knowledge, talent, and experience of our residents, and we collaborate with our partners and resources in the greater community. So I just wanted to spend a little bit of time to unpack what's behind that vision statement. When we first began, the consistent theme that came from our residents was a desire to experience lifelong learning. Thad, we didn't use your word tickle, but that's very apt. I keep thinking I'm going to be calling you Tickle Me Elmo from now on, but it's right about tickling our intellectual curiosity and our love of cultural stimulation. So lifelong learning and growth was a very, very key aspect when we formed the Academy. When we talk about it being an accessible atmosphere, being inclusive and respectful to all, we recognize that we have a span of residents who are going through different phases in their senior life. We wanted to be certain that when it comes to any kind of physical mobility challenges, visual or hearing issues, that we would make certain to be inclusive and respectful of those needs in our Academy offerings. Another key phrase is harnessing the wealth of the knowledge, talent, and experience of our residents. Our residents are accomplished people who had professions, who had volunteer leadership roles, who traveled the world. And they're not done just because they've moved to a retirement community. So we knew that we didn't want to sort of just sit back passively and accept what was provided to us, that residents wanted to be involved, not only in planning the programming, but in presenting the programming. So a good number of our presentations are actually delivered by our own residents. This could mean a standalone lecture. Thad, for instance, is a career epidemiologist, and he has given fascinating lectures on medical topics. We have a group on current events where groups of people get together to discuss. We had a resident who has a PhD in economics, worked for the Rand Corporation, who hosted that series for over 4 years, and Thad and Morgan have taken over hosting since then. We have weekly TED Talks where groups watch a TED Talk together, and then there's a facilitator for conversation. So those are just examples of the ways in which our residents participate in the Creative Living Academy offerings that we have. Even the word academy was very carefully chosen because it kind of connotes an academic objective to what we're doing, and this idea of lifelong learning. So we publish an actual monthly catalog that gives a full description of all of our offerings. And then we have an at-a-glance monthly calendar where you can just have a sort of what's happening today and what's happening this week. But the catalog gives much more detail. Musical enrichment offerings are very popular. As Catherine said, we have everything from classical to jazz. We have guest performances by groups such as Camerata Pacifica, a renowned chamber music group. We have the LA Children's Choir giving us live performances as well. So there is quite a richness of musical offerings. And I think the lectures have been key for stimulating the interest of a number of people. I personally would not have signed up for a course in astronomy, for example, but here in Altadena, Pasadena is apparently the world center of astronomy because we have Caltech, we have JPL, we have Mount Wilson, and we have the Carnegie Observatory, and we've had a number of guest lectures on astronomy. We've had a trip up to Mount Wilson where we were privileged to spend an evening within the dome of the giant telescope and do some stargazing. So that is that's an introduction to what life enrichment and especially the Creative Living Academy means to us, not only here at MonteCedro, but across all communities. There is a staff member who is our Director of Life Enrichment, and she has the responsibility for coordinating programming across all 3 of the communities. So we're very proud of the Creative Living Academy and consider life enrichment to be one of the hallmarks of living here. In addition to the formal offerings at the Academy, the broader concept of life enrichment provides our resident with fitness and recreational offerings, interest groups, and opportunities for social engagement, sometimes just plain fun. In the fitness category, we have daily fitness classes, both in a fitness room and in the outdoor pool with aerobics, but we have other things. We have Kung Fu and Tai Chi. We have boxing. When I told my grandkids that I was taking a boxing class, you know, they got quite a kick out of that. So again, it's something that I probably would never have signed up if I'd had to go to an outside gym for it, but it was here, it was easy for me, and I now know what a right hook and a left jab are. So we're going to start by giving you a little more information about some of the life enrichment offerings, and I'm going to start with Catherine. Here at MonteCedro, please tell us about some of the specific activities and the programs that you most enjoy.
Thank you, Wendy. Well, one of the things you've already alluded to, that's current events. I've been a member of current events since it started with Lee Johnson, and it's continuing with Thad and Morgan, his wife. I enjoy it very much. We do make an effort to not get involved politically too much because we have both sides of the coin here in our residence, but we really have wonderful discussions, and Thad and Morgan usually do a little background on the topic we're going to discuss. I find that very stimulating. It's twice a month. And of course, I did mention theater, and we meet every week. And we not only prepare readings for the to present to our residents, but we also read just for fun among ourselves. Now, we don't act on a stage. We sit down and we have mics and we get into a characterization, but we're not walking around on a stage. And so I find that fun. Another thing I like very much is bridge. And we have a nice bridge program here. Plus we have, you know, mahjong and poker and skip-bo. And I'm sure if somebody wanted to start dominoes, they would find people to play dominoes. But then I love the movies. We have movies in the Eaton Theater about 3 or 4 times a week. And Wendy's husband is a marvelous projectionist, I must say, because the residents run the projectioner. And the one thing I belong to, I don't want to forget, but it's restricted. I hesitate to say that, but it is a restricted group and you cannot join it just because you live here. And that we have a very strict requirement. You must be 90 years old. That's our 90 plus group. And we meet once a month. And I would say when we're doing the Zoom talks, we might have 15 people. When we met in person before the pandemic, we would have maybe 20. And actually about 40 belong to the group, but they don't all come. So these are some of the things that I enjoy. Oh, I forgot to mention Thoughtful Thursdays. Mm-hmm. That's a bi-monthly group, and we talk about things like disappointments, gratitude, happiness. And these questions are framed usually by our chaplain. And he puts some questions up, and then we participate. It's led, the actual session is led by one of the residents, but we take turns doing it. And you can talk as much as you want, or you don't have to talk at all. So it's whatever you choose. So these are some of the things I enjoy doing and that I find make my life here so interesting and stimulating.
Thank you, Catherine. Well, I have to admit that you've challenged me. I hate to think that there's something I'm not permitted to do. So I'll wait until I qualify for membership in the 90
Yes.
group, which is a growing group. And some of my closest friends here and are my role model for aging and remaining active. I can barely keep up with some of you, so that's great. Paula, at the Canterbury, you've had an interesting lifestyle and have been able to combine some of your prior career skills and interests with what you do at the Canterbury. Can you please tell us about some of your activities?
We have a large amount of activities, although I have been inspired by hearing some of the things that go on at MonteCedro, and we'll bring it back to the activities committee. However, one can be as busy as one wants to be. And the nice thing is if there's something that you would really like to see happen, come to the activities committee and we'll do our best. Now, as for me, there are 2 things that I'm involved in, and they're quite opposite, and I'd like to tell you about them. One is Helping Hands, where a group of us get together and knit or crochet. And sometimes we do it for ourselves, but mostly for our care center. We knit lap robes, we knit shawls, and sometimes we even knit hats. But these things are warmly received, no pun intended, and we're glad to do it because it's a feeling of sharing, and with those who have to share with others who may not. The other thing in which I am involved in is a writers group. We meet, anybody can write whatever they want. There are no rules. I encourage people to write their own life stories for their children, but especially for their grandchildren, because, you know, if we don't tell them, nobody will, and our lives will disappear into the to the unknown. And writing it down as a gift for them is something that each one of us can give that nobody else can give to them. So I do encourage. I don't teach, I encourage.
Oh, thank you so much, Paula. Now, several of our panelists have been very involved in the governance aspect of our community. And this is another distinction between living in a not-for-profit versus a for-profit community. We don't simply pay our money and sit back and wait to see how management's going to perform. We are actively involved in the governance in each of our communities. So Thad, we're going to start with you because you've been vice president of the resident council here at MonteCedro. So if you could, please describe the function of the council and also the various interest groups and committees that provide residents the opportunity to become involved in the areas where they have both interest and also expertise.
Sure. We have an active resident council. We have 8 members on the council. And I think that the way it's currently apportioned, including our members at large, the members at large have taken on the liaison work with the multiple committees at MonteCedro. We meet once a month. Obviously, we're doing it currently via Zoom. We have an agenda. The agenda basically ranges from some things that are small and other things that are large. As an example, we are looking at a new contract here at MonteCedro for our TV and internet provider, and we had a work of that of the Building and Grounds Committee, the team on that committee that basically put a lot of work into investigating, along with the management, the various opportunities for renegotiating that contract and potentially having other bidders on that contract. And they will come forward tomorrow to our resident council to give their presentation. We have about 19 committees here, and they are integral to what we do. I will say that of those committees, especially for the new residents, the welcoming committee is very, very important. When my wife and I came here, we already, as I said, knew a number of people here at MonteCedro. The lady at that time who was the chair of that committee, Betsy Tyler, took us under her wing as she did every new resident. Met with us, we had dinner with her. She introduced us to her dogs, which was very important. I love dogs and I also love cats. And the other members of the welcoming committee were equally involved. And we found that to be a pleasant intro to moving into the facility, into the community. And it's not just the welcoming committee that has that function. Everybody really does have that function here at MonteCedro, but they are key to that. We have other committees that are very important. Our dining committee, for example, looking at our menu and the food that we have. We have our wellness committee, very important for the health and welfare of the residents. And what happens with these committees is when they have recommendations to be made to the management about things that need to be addressed. They might, as I said, they might be relatively minor. They might be of larger import. They will investigate them, look to the resident council to present them to the management after giving a report. And that has been, I think, an excellent example of how we're not just residents here. We actually have a role in the function of the organization, and I think that's very key. It gives us obviously agency, and I think that it's important not to feel that, well, you've lost agency as you age. I think that is something that many people fear, and we obviously have multiple opportunities here for people to work in the various committees and to express that agency and to make their voice heard. So that's the function of the resident council. There are 7 elective members, and there's one member who is a non-voting member. That's actually Wendy. because she is on as a representative for the Creative Living Academy. And that illustrates how significant the Creative Living Academy is to the function of this community.
Thanks so much, Thad. So you've painted a picture of a lot of collaboration between the residents on the one hand and staff and management on the other, in how things are determined at the community. Now, Karen, you are currently the president of the Covington's Resident Association, and I know that internally you have a similar structure, but outside of the Covington, you've also represented your community in regular meetings with your counterparts at the other two communities and with senior management at ECS. So could you please talk a little bit more about how that collaboration works across all the communities and the value of having regular access to management, particularly during the pandemic, and the ways in which residents have had input into decisions that affect our communities?
I'd be glad to, Wendy. This is one of the good things that has come from the COVID pandemic this year, and that is that we began right after March 17th or so. We were invited, I was invited to join our CEO, our COO and CFO, all the James Rothrick, who's the CEO and president of the ECS communities, and then Terry Quigley, who's operations chief operating officer, and Charles Riley, who's our CFO, and they actually invited us to join and to become acquainted with one another and to collaborate with us. They ask our opinion. What's going on in your community? How are people getting along? What are the issues that people are facing? What are they worried about, and so forth? Well, this has just been an invaluable experience. We meet once a week on Wednesdays for an hour. And we've been able to bring in all sorts of questions, concerns. We have taken we have taken the residents' position that, hey, we're independent living people. We are able to think for ourselves. So we have sometimes we have lively discussions that we don't all agree on, but I think we've learned so much from each other, and it's an incredible experience of teamwork. So I think that to me is just a priceless thing that we have going with the three communities here. That's just invaluable.
Wow. So as you shared with us, the leadership from each of the three communities has weekly access to the CEO, the COO, and the CFO of the top tier of the organization. It's hard to imagine that would ever occur in a for-profit situation where the CEO might be some sort of distant person in a different city, in a different state. So that's really impressive. Thank you for sharing that. We've all talked about how important it is to us to feel that we live in community. Thad talked about having agency. You mentioned Betsy Tyler, chair of our Welcome Committee. And I remember once Betsy was thinking about, and she was our very first residents, she said that before moving to MonteCedro, she wasn't certain whether it would feel more like moving into her college dormitory or staying in a hotel. And we each can sort of get that visualization and in our mind and remember that in the dorm, you could be running down the hall in your pajamas and fuzzy slippers, visiting each other at any time of the day. And in a hotel, when you pass people in the hallway, sometimes you don't even make eye contact because they're strangers who are just renting their room for the night. So Betsy wondered what living in an ECS community would feel like somewhere along that spectrum. I suspect that for each of us, we would place our marker at a little bit different point on the spectrum, but really not at either one of those two extremes. So we wanted to talk about what it means to us to be in community. So Paula, we're going to start with you. And if you could share with us aspects of the community at the Canterbury that were important to you, both when you first decided to live there and also in your ongoing life?
Well, as you mentioned, my mother had lived here for a number of years, and you might have assumed that the first place I would go to would be the Canterbury. But no, that wasn't the case. I looked around at other places. Now, some of them were very bright and shiny. They looked like upscale hotels. And they didn't have quite the warmth that I was looking for. When you walk into the Canterbury, you feel friendliness and you feel warmth. Everybody says hello to you, from staff to residents. The staff knows our name, after everybody's name, after we have been here for 2 days. And even though we may not remember each other's names, the staff always knows who we are and who everyone else is. I can be as busy as I want to be. We have in-house activities, and we go out into the community, to museums, to restaurants. And it's, what can I tell you? I feel safe here. I feel part of a community, and I'm very, very happy to be here.
Thank you so much, Paula. And ever since I first met you, I know that feeling of warmth and friendliness and a family feel is something that you've described every time we've had the conversation. So it really comes across that that's an important aspect for you. Thad, you and Morgan, now it's a little bit different because you are in a couple as opposed to being solo, but as a relatively new resident here at MonteCedro, how have you and Morgan been able to develop friendships and a social life?
That's a very good question. We, of course, everyone has to eat, and dining is a very important activity, but it's even more important, I think, in the type of communities we live in. So I would say that the dining activity actually is a clear-cut, top-of-the-line experience, but because the way it is conducted here, we are able to go down and we get invited to somebody's table. When we came here, we would go down and we would ask for a table for two, and somebody would say, "Oh, come over and sit with us." And that was a very general phenomenon, and it goes on all the time. People want to talk, they want to get to know you, they want to hear your story, they want to exchange ideas. And we found that dining was one of the clear-cut avenues to get to know people and develop friendships. The other one, frankly, that I think was surprise to me in some ways, when we had our activities in MonteCedro, for example, as we talked about, there would be programs or lectures or a music program. There was the opportunity then to talk with the other residents before the program started, after it was done, and sometimes even during the program. When Camerata Pacifica came here, I remember being asked up to show how I could imitate a double reed instrument with a straw. And that was a real icebreaker. And Wendy was also involved in that. I forget what instrument you had, but
It's the French horn.
yeah, that's right. So this was a great opportunity. And then we laughed about it, we talked about it, and it was a learning activity, but also a friendship and bonding activity. There's lots of others. We have a place here called Station 8. It's got a bar. We have happy hours there. People have an opportunity to go down there. They have karaoke singing. I would never do that because then I'd have to pay for fixing the glass. But in any event, that's another clear opportunity. So with the committees as well, the various clubs and so forth, there's no shortage of being able to find friends and make friendships that are very long, very enduring.
Thank you so much, Thad. Karen, with you, we wanted to explore another aspect of what it means to live in community, and that is the spiritual side, which appeals to a lot of people now. Some people have asked me, well, your community is owned by Episcopal Community Services, do you have to be Episcopalian to live there? And the answer to that, of course, is no, that it's a very ecumenical community, and we have people on a wide spectrum of religious and a-religious practices. But Karen, your spiritual life has been important to you. Could you please share that with us?
Well, ever since I was a little child, I've been drawn to God and religious experiences and just that whole way of thinking. And what is so, and my husband and I always participated in church and a lot of ecumenical groups. And at the Covington, we have this wonderful experience of having a wide range of people from different denominations, not us Christians, Jews, non-believers, but we are so enriched by each other, and we have opportunities. Our chaplain's given us, particularly, we had a theological reflections group that incorporated, people with varying views, but we would always have a very challenging book to read, and it was so enriching for all of us and made us feel closer together. We have had celebrations, for instance, not only the typical Christian celebrations, but the Jewish celebrations. And I remember Passover. Everybody's been invited to join if they so wish, and so we learn a lot from each other's traditions. So I think that is that matters to a lot of people, and I think it's a wonderful dimension that we have here, that atmosphere.
Could I ask you, Karen, you mentioned that there is a full-time chaplain who conducts services, but do residents also attend religious services outside the community?
Oh yes, you're free. I go to my church nearby, and people can do that, of course, and they go to the Bible studies, and if they want to have, we have Eucharistic services on Sunday morning for those that can't get out. And we have, those are early in the morning, and then we have an ecumenical service at 11 o'clock every Sunday morning. So there are opportunities for everybody, and we have close relationships with, I know for sure the Catholic priest nearby has participated and been, made sure that people have support in that area. And it's a good feeling. I think anybody would feel very comfortable, no matter what their faith tradition.
Thank you. Thank you. So next, Catherine, I'm going to come to you with another aspect of what it means to be in community. On the panel, we have both married and single people. You and Karen have mentioned that you were widowed after moving into your respective community. And so here, and I can say in particular at MonteCedro, we have a mix. We have single women, single men, we have married couples. We have a really good mix. But please talk to us about the adjustment and the transition that you underwent after losing Harry. And it's been an experience that's been shared by many other people. And I think people have that concern about what it may be like to be part of a couple and then to transition into being a widow or widower after you've been here.
Yes, Wendy. Well, it is very different when you move in as a couple and you do things as a couple, you socialize as a couple, and some of your activities you are doing as a couple. And of course, then suddenly you are alone, and it became apparent to me that it was important that I join groups that I hadn't joined so that I would not only be active in new fields, but I would meet people. And so I did join some of our groups. And I also found that we have a chaplain too, and he runs an ecumenical service weekly, which I did start to participate in because my husband and I had always gone out to church. Many people go out to church, and we had done that, but I wasn't doing that quite as much sometimes, but not quite as much. So I started joining the weekly service and found many friendships through that because it's a very close ecumenical service. And I think having a chaplain is very important because it's available. You do need help often, not necessarily talking to him in the transition, but having some of the spiritual services that they offer. For instance, we have Bible classes, not just taught by our chaplain, Brian, but we have residents here who are retired ministers and who also have taught at the collegiate level in academic courses on religion. And so I did some of those, and actually a book club grew out of one, and I know that one of the courses. So it's important to have resources, spiritual resources. It was important to me, and also to make an effort to join different groups where I would meet people and I could help transition. One of the groups I joined, which was really very interesting, is Thoughtful Thursdays. It's not really a religious group, but it's more thinking about some of the issues of life. And we'd have a theme. It's bi-monthly, say happiness or responsibilities or relationships. The chaplain would pick a topic and have questions, and you could talk to it or you could just sit and listen. It was all up to you how much you wanted to participate. So I think when you transition from losing a spouse to a single life, it's important that you have available, which we do here, not only the classes, but the spiritual resources to help you make that very necessary transition. You have to make it. And if you do put a little effort into it and using the resources we have here, then you will find that you can continue living a contented, productive life.
Thank you so much, Catherine. And, we had shared that you've been widowed not once, but 3 times.
3 times, yes.
I mean, if I had to think of a word to describe your resilience would be one.
Thank you.
Because you've led such a full, active life as you transitioned from Canterbury, who was just a delightful member of our community. So one of the things that I wanted to observe that has been shared by each of the panelists in one way or the other is the opportunity that living in a community affords us to participate collaboratively in ways that we never would have done in our lives when we were living in our single family homes, our condos and apartments. So I often think about the fact that when Larry and I were living in Encino, I retired from my full-time job and I still had my individual activities, but I wasn't going out to the kinds of things we have right here. So if it meant that I had to go and buy a ticket or I had to go and sign up and I had to get in the car and drive someplace, it just didn't feel as accessible to me. Here, I really just have to look at the calendar, make certain I block the time, and then go to the auditorium, go to the fitness room, go to the art studio, and have access to all these wonderful things. So I think about on our panel today, Karen and Catherine are prime examples of people who have really learned to love performing arts on the performing side of the equation and not just the audience side. So Catherine mentioned that she participates in the Armchair Theater Group. I wanted to share a little bit of a tidbit about that. In one of their presentations, Catherine was the star of the show. She was the French maid. And she did this just spot on rendition, complete with her accent. And they wear costumes, as Catherine said, they don't move around a stage on their marks. They're seated at a table, but she was in costume as the little French maid. And the accent was just perfect. And Karen, I know that you've been also a member of the acting group, showing your acting chops in various skits that you presented at the Covington. And I think that you previously did a little bit with when you lived in Laguna Niguel with the Pageant of the Masters. Also, Karen has learned to play the ukulele. And again, would we have signed up for those classes and gone out to learn the ukulele? Maybe not. But there is a group at the Covington, and I think you provide weekly concerts and sing-alongs for the residents. So these are just a few examples of the opportunities we have for, again, that theme of lifelong learning, but also being part of a group of seniors who live alone. Living alone would rarely have that kind of an experience. So that's a key aspect for us. We're going to start to wrap up our formal panel now because we want to allow time for questions and answers. But to conclude, before we do that, I'm going to ask each panel we're going to go around and ask you if you would share some of the key thoughts that you would like our audience today to have as a key takeaway about living in your particular community. So it's a bit of a lightning round to synopsize what we've been talking about for the past hour or so. So Paula, I'm going to start with you and the Canterbury.
Okay. The Canterbury is on a hill, and when we go out on the Valmonte patio, we can see Los Angeles miles and miles. We can see the mountains. On clear days, we can even see the Hollywood sign. And I look at this vast vista and I think I could live almost any place, but I'm here. This is my home. This is my community. I'm 88 years young and I want to be here forever. And that's how I feel.
Thank you so much. It sounds like you have these amazing views from up on that hillside. I haven't been there yet, but I'm telling you that when we're permitted to do that, I'm going to come and visit you so I can enjoy those beautiful views from the open patio. Thad, at the MonteCedro, what are the key takeaways you'd like for our audience to part with?
Well, Altadena is a very, very beautiful community in many ways. We lived, before we came here, in Pasadena, sort of the next door neighbors, but Altadena is very beautiful. We're literally nestled against the mountains. So the San Gabriel Mountains are, just wonderful, beautiful views. We have wonderful facilities. It is a newer facility than the Covington and the Canterbury. And it was well planned and well thought out. And I can't say anything more than it's just state-of-the-art facilities. It's marvelous. And the longer term plan will include adding on to that. And in addition to the marvelous community of residents, I have to say that our staff is just outstanding. They're trained, they're vetted, they're trained, and they become really not the staff, but they become really someone who's just fun to see in the hall and say hello and how are you doing and how's your family. And they provide for what we need. I mean, everything from dining services to housekeeping to maintenance to wellness, driving, transportation, you name it. So I would say that the staff here is also a real selling point for MonteCedro, and I'm sure the staff at the Canterbury and the Covington is equally good, and I would love to hear and love to see them as well.
Thank you, Thad. Catherine, same community, MonteCedro. What are your key takeaways?
Well, I think MonteCedro is a very nice place to, as they say, age in place. It's comfortable living. You don't have the chores that you have in your own house or your own condo. We have the housekeeping. We have the cooking taken care of. We have the cooking taken care of. We have the repairs. We have a wonderful maintenance staff. We have transportation. So we have all those sort of necessities of life taken care of. We have a wellness center where they can provide caregivers if you should need them, but they're also a resource. They bring in a dermatologist, a podiatrist, an audiologist, and there is an internist if you don't have your own internist to use. So it's really a very convenient way of life. Plus, we have all the stimulating activities, so you don't just sit in your apartment and veg out. So I really find it's a very contented and of course, we have wonderful residents. We really do. They're very stimulating, diverse people, and you're sure to find some people to replace the friendships that we all lose throughout life. And so I'm very pleased to be here, aging in place.
Thank you so much, Catherine. And Karen, you're at the Covington, and what are the key takeaways about your community?
Well, first, I thought about what I wanted to share. I heard when the Covington first came into being, the most exciting thing was that we have undercover garage, underground parking, gated underground parking, and a lot of us still have our cars. So that's very good. It's good with the insurance company too. But we have the most exquisite campus, and we have, thanks to the generosity of some people, we have a secret garden. We have a beautiful campus to walk all over. We have the independent living building, and then we have cottages around, and you can make like 3 rounds around it. It's like walking around a little English village in my mind. We have beautiful views. We're in the foothills right above Laguna Beach. We have access from the 73 tollway and other roads to everything in Orange County. And I can make it from Aliso Viejo to Newport Beach, for instance, in 20 minutes. I mean, it's unbelievable. So I echo everything everybody else said. It's just the place to be. You will never be sorry if you choose to live in one of our communities.
Thank you, Karen. Well, I'm going to exercise the prerogative of the moderator's chair and give a little bit more information about food, because that's one of the most important things in my life. My husband, Larry, always says that he says, Wendy lives to eat, he eats to live, but I'm the opposite. I've been a lifelong foodie, and that's been very important to me. So I'm a member of our dining committee, and I have to say that our food is simply exceptional. We have an executive chef and sous chef who are culinary trained professional chefs, and then they've done a marvelous job with our staff. So we have rotating menus, we have freedom of choice. It's not simply somebody putting a plate in front of me saying, this is today's dinner selection. I can order anything off the menu. Every day we have 3 daily specials, a regular daily, a vegetarian, and a market fish of the day. We have an in-house pastry chef, so all of our desserts and our breakfast pastries are made in-house by our own pastry chef. And we have 3 different dining venues. The regular full-time dining is called the Off Lake Bistro. Thad mentioned that we have a lounge called Station 8 that has a licensed bar where you can get any full alcohol and beer and wine, and you can also order sort of bar food. And then on the weekends at Marcel's, we have fine dining. And the fine dining experience here is really, I can't imagine getting a better meal at any of our local restaurants, of which we have many, many in Pasadena. But right in our own building, we have Marcel's. So for me, the food that I eat is very, very important to me. And I love the quality and I love the variety. We have a lot of different ethnic offerings, which have always been important to me. So I just have to say the food is really special. And I wanted to add that. We've now come to the formal conclusion of the panel, but don't go away because we have more for you. I'm going to invite Krista, there she is, to rejoin us. Krista, for your observations, remarks, and comments, and then Krista's going to moderate our question and answer session. So Krista, over to you.
Thank you, everyone. Oh my goodness, lots of information. I want to thank the panel for sharing your stories and helping us get a glimpse of what life is like in an ECS community. I do want to say that for those of you, as Wendy said, we had selected the panelists, and as you can all see by the panel, these are very busy people that are involved in a lot at their communities. Although there is all that choice, you also have the choice to not be involved. And we have many residents who just enjoy being in the community and not necessarily participating. So that too is an option. Each community has a variety of resident-driven and staff-driven, from activities to life enrichment. It's been an evolution in our communities. So I encourage you to talk to your marketing staff about that if you're interested. I heard a lot about, there really is something for everyone at our communities. And it is important to note, as Paula mentioned, the safety and security, not necessarily from a locking the doors, if you're gated, having security people, but really that security of, as a nonprofit, that as long as you're not gambling your money away or giving it all away, that if you're fiscally responsible, you will not ever be asked to leave. And I think that's really important. Not all communities can say that. And that does bring peace of mind, not only to our residents, but the families. As Paula had mentioned, families you're giving a gift to your family in choosing to live at one of our communities. Again, there is a lot of information. I do encourage any of you that have questions to go ahead and type it in the chat. I do have some questions that were sent to me or just the panelists individually, so I will read some of those. I'm gonna start with one as Wendy ended with food, and this one's for Karen. Karen, somebody had seen Chef Mike do a demonstration on your Facebook page, and he was making shrimp bruschetta, and it said it looked delicious. So is this something that you as a resident get? Do they do demonstrations? Do you get this kind of food? And maybe talk about choice at the Covington from a dining perspective.
Well, we have, I think, about 3 or 4 chefs total that have been, they've been 5-star chefs in different communities, and they wanted to retire, and they love to teach. So the sort of thing, the shrimp bruschetta, I was not available for that one, but we do talk about food, and we have an incredible dining committee, and we have phenomenal choices, which I think was mentioned by some of the other people. And the food is just, I think that we got last year in 2019, across the country, we were in the 97.3 or something approval, highest ranking of all the food in retirement communities, similar retirement communities across the country. So we abound in very talented people. Sometimes they teach how to make things, and I don't know if that's answered the question, but.
Yeah, and what Karen is talking about, just for those who don't know, all 3 communities outsource or contract the food service to a company called Morrison, which is part of the Compass Group, which is the 8th largest food service company in the world. It's global. And so the training and the resources that ECS gets from partnering with a larger corporation, the staff are ours from a dining services, except for the management, but the programs are all resident driven. So we talked a little bit about some of you being on the dining services committee. It truly is, every menu is different. There is no one menu that is the same across the Morrison company. And they do their own, as we as ECS do a resident satisfaction or engagement survey. The dining services organization does one as well. And so the Covington was in the top, had 97.2% satisfaction, which is incredible in food. If you can get over 90, that's we're all picky. Nobody makes their meatloaf the same, so it's a tough task. So we're very fortunate. Wendy, I have a question for you. And you mentioned that your mom lived at the end of her life at MonteCedro as well. And can you talk a little bit about the community that she came from, and then her moving to MonteCedro and the experience she had and how that was different?
Sure. Thanks, Krista. Thanks for mentioning my mother. I mentioned that I was from Cleveland, Ohio. So my mother spent her adult lifetime living in Cleveland. And as she began to age, and also as my siblings and I began to leave the area, we were concerned about what would happen with Mom after my father died in 2003. She continued to live on her own. She's fiercely independent, but there came a point where her safety was of paramount concern. And so I went back to Ohio and researched and found an assisted living community. So the difference, unlike ECS, is it was not independent living. It was designed as an assisted living community. She did have an apartment. She had a 1-bedroom apartment and full staff support. But the difference was, although her physical needs were being taken care of, her physical and her medical, I began to see Mom begin to sort of, slide downhill mentally, cognitively. She developed mild impairment, but she just wasn't getting any stimulation. They had a few, they'd say, oh, we have a guest pianist, come and hear them play. But she didn't have life enrichment in the way that we experience it here in our community. So we made the decision as a family to relocate her and move her here to our courtyard, which is our memory care section for 20 residents. I've been volunteering there. So the obvious personal benefit was that I was able to see my mother literally every day to spend some time with her. But the advantage for Mom was that through life enrichment, she came alive. And she began, she would say, oh, they're painting silk scarves and I'm no good at art. And somebody would say, oh, Carolyn, give it a try. And suddenly Mom was painting a silk scarf. She was playing with goats during goat yoga. She was dancing, she was singing, and she had a life that she had not experienced in her prior community. And not only did she have this experience within the courtyard with their life enrichment programming, but at MonteCedro, we have worked really, really hard to be an all-inclusive community, bringing our independent living and our courtyard residents together to share many of the same opportunities. So when we had concerts in the main auditorium, Mom always loved music, I would take her to the auditorium and people would say, oh, there's Wendy and her mom. My mom was about 4'8", and 91 pounds, this little tiny slip of a thing. But she loved to go to the auditorium to experience life enrichment in the broader community, in addition to having it within the courtyard. And that's something that she not only wasn't having in her former community, but I think is really, I hesitate to use the word unique. It is so overused, I think, in our vernacular, but it was a unique experience for her. And it brought her to the last 6 months of her life that my siblings and I are so grateful for.
Thank you for sharing that, Wendy. And I think it's important for everybody to know that even though we have various levels of living on our campuses, that every resident is free to go to each level and vice versa. So if I know that at the Covington, there's a very serious bingo for money. They play for money in assisted living at the Covington. And so there are many of the residents who live in the independent residents will go to play bingo in the assisted living. Now I know at MonteCedro there is no bingo because that's a different program. So, there's lots of uniqueness, and everybody again is welcome from a dining perspective or from an activities or life enrichment. Everybody is free to go to each, vice versa. So you're not bound to an area in which you live, which is very important. And so the next question is actually for Paula and Thad. So we'll start with you, Paula. The question is, can you tell us about the top several things, whether it's a pro or a con, that you wish you knew before you moved in?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear. What?
Can you list several things or anything that was either positive or negative that you wish you knew before you moved in, that you didn't know about and you moved in and it was either a surprise pleasantly or not? And then it was, it says here, things that made your decision to move into the community easier or harder. And I'm not sure I understand that part of it, but just the anything that you found out after moving in you wish you knew before you moved in, good or bad.
I think what I wished is that everybody wore name tag. have everybody's name I seem to forget constantly. The people I know the best are the ones whose names I forget the first. So if they had name tags, I think I really would have been happy about that. But that's such a small thing. As I said, the staff remembers everybody's name. So if I forget, they will let me know. And as far as moving here, I had been alone for almost 7 years, and I decided it was time to move into a community, and I was ready, and here, and that's why I came. And that's it.
And
Now to
Thad, what
Thad.
about you? Anything that you learned post move-in that you wish you knew before?
No, to be honest, I can't think of anything. We, as I said, we had some prior experience of talking with all the people here, many of them at least, and the staff, Ruben and his staff in the office where we got our unit, they were wonderful. They worked with us, answered questions, were available, throughout the entire process. I apologize. They're starting up the generator here. So if you hear a generator noise, that's not me. But in any event, as far as our decision to move in, one of the things that was very helpful, my wife and I have moved many times before. And as everyone knows, as you get older, you probably do better if you try to downsize. And we had progressively been downsizing since my Navy retirement in 2002. So we had some experience with that. But there are several firms that will help you with moving in. And we chose one of them that they recommended to us. We had a wonderful experience with that person. And if anything, I would recommend that when you move, if you have any questions about doing the logistics and so forth, consider one of the firms that they're going to recommend to you, because these people do this for a living, and they're quite good at it, and it's well worth the cost. So.
And we do have a week from today at 11 o'clock. That's a great transition. We do have another webinar that is on downsizing from Clear Home Solutions. The other two organizations, just real quick, are Helping Hands and General Transitions that many of our residents use to do that. So if you don't already know about them, that's something that we will share next week for you as well.
Just
And
to add to
yes.
that, to elaborate on Thad's point, downsizing is key. And I think one of the things that we worked really hard to do it beforehand, before moving here, but from sharing with other residents, I think we would all agree that less is more, right? We don't have to bring our entire lives. And I think the people who downsized beforehand and were able to get settled on day one by using one of these services were much happier and more relaxed than people who chose to do it on their own and had unpacked boxes stacked around the walls, for several months after they moved in. So peace of mind was really important. And as I said, the downsizing was difficult. We all have stuff that we've accumulated over our lifetime. But I will say that once it's gone, it's okay. I don't miss it. I mean, it was hard to part with. Our grandchildren don't want the style of furniture and the fine china and the things that we valued in our generation. So I gave it all away, but I donated it. And it broke my heart at the time, but now that I don't have it, it's okay. I don't miss it. And I'm happier to have brought with me only what fits in our apartment instead of overstuffing. So that was a key learning for me.
Thank you for sharing. Karen or Catherine, anything else you want to add to that? Any lessons learned or things that you would like to share that folks should know?
I spent many years downsizing from a large house to a smaller house to a condo. So I didn't find it necessary to use people, but I agree with Wendy. I gave away. I had an enormous amount of china and silver and things for entertaining, and large dining room table, and I gave all that away. and I don't miss it. I mean, other people seem to have kept some nice things, but I kept a few pieces of nice furniture, and but basically everything else I just got rid of. I gave to my children most of it, but I mean, it's not mine, it's theirs.
And Karen, anything that you wish
Well,
you
I-
knew before you moved in or?
Well, I have sort of different situation because I still have my family home in Laguna, and I have family members that live there. So when we came, and it was a difficult time when I came, and my daughter helped me decorate this apartment like a resort or resort home, entirely different style, which was wonderful. And I've been slowly, giving more and more away. My family likes to, they're redecorating and everything. And so I've been taking longer to give away the things and getting rid of a lot of stuff that just needs to be destroyed. But I've given Goodwill and Salvation Army and all that sort of thing, tons of stuff too. But I think that if you can downsize ahead of time or just use, as was recommended, one of these services, I think that would be the best way to go.
Okay, we have one more question, and then if we're going to be out of time, this is kind of a touchy one. It says, what about the national politics? We've been obsessed this last year. Are there any Democratic or Republican clubs? So Karen, any Democratic or Republican clubs at the Covington?
I think they're two hidden ones because everybody's been very respectful of everybody. We have all ranges of political opinion here. And there have been a couple of quiet groups that have been meeting sometimes. So it depends what you're interested in. If you want something like that, you can start it if it hasn't, or, but we do have the current events type of situation. And so there are all ranges of opinion. It's a very exciting community to live in.
It's a hot topic. Paula, how about at the Canterbury? Any public ones?
No public ones, but like-minded people seem to find like-minded people. But there have been no open quarrels. We're all still talking to each other, and that's a good sign.
Yeah, that's good. And Thad, Catherine, Wendy, any public?
Yeah, well, I play bridge with a foursome, or I did before the pandemic. And we never bring up politics because two favor one party and two favor the other. Politics is just never brought up. We know how each other feels, but we don't bring it up. So more or less at MonteCedro, people, I think, like Paula said, people know, like seeks like, but people do not discuss politics publicly.
I would agree with, that's been my experience. We do have the informal groups. So we don't have anything that's officially a club. But so for instance, during the debates, both in 2016 and in 2020, well, actually in 2020, we were not visiting each other, but in 2016, small groups of like-minded people would gather together, get their takeout dinner and come together in an apartment to watch the debates together and then have discussion, spirited discussion throughout and certainly afterward. So it wasn't an official event. It was an informal gathering. And I totally agree with Paula and Karen, like-minded people sort of gravitate to each other. Having said that, on the political spectrum, when we're in community, there's a lot of respect for the diversity of opinion that exists. And so that's why I think we don't discuss it publicly, but we find the people with whom we want to have those discussions in a less formal setting.
Well said. And that I'm going to end on that note. I will go ahead and I'm going to share my screen. So if anybody has Any additional questions that we didn't get to because we ran out of time, please contact us. You can reach out to stayingconnected@ecsforseniors.org, and I encourage you to do so. I appreciate everybody hanging in there with us for this 90 minutes, and thank you to our panel. Appreciate it. I think this was a great session. So everybody have a great afternoon, and this will be available on our website in a couple days in the past event section, and we will get links out to everybody that attended as well.
And Krista, just for housekeeping, do you
Yes.
want the panelists to remain, or are we going to dial back in?
We're going to dial back in.
Okay. For all
Okay.
panelists,
We'll take a quick break and we'll dial back in. But thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bye.
Are we supposed